Alright, y'all. So this episode's gonna be a little laid back. Um, it's I'm a little crossfaded, I won't lie. Um, and so we're gonna talk about a plant that I enjoy. Cause this is Aureum having fun in it. Episode 7, Rearing Rambles. So let's talk a little bit about what I was doing a couple years ago. Back at the University of Rhode Island, I was working with a person running a course on plant and algae and fungus diversity. And what you have within plants is this step ladder of evolutionary adaptations. So all plants are multicellular eukaryotic organisms that have a secondary chloroplast. I'm not going to get into details about what that means, but it's different than a primary chloroplast. They also are organisms with a cell wall and a central vacuole within the cell, and they have cell type specialization and a sterile lining of cells around the gametes. Those last two traits are mainly what separate them from algae. So algae is not actually a plant because algae doesn't have to be multicellular, algae doesn't have to have cell type specialization, and algae never has a sterile cell lining around the gametes. Now, within plants, you have your non-vascular plants, which basically just meet the bare minimum criteria for being plants. So they're considered plants. These are things like mosses and liverworts and other bryophytic organisms. These plants don't get very big and they have to live in very moist areas. Then plants develop vasculature, so every other plant in the plant kingdom has vasculature and macrophylla, which are true leaves. And one of the first groups are your pteridiophytes, which are your ferns and their allies. Pteridiophytes, which is where we're going to stay today, don't reproduce by seed, they reproduce by spore. And as we were talking about this in this class I was helping TA for, we were trying to get a good fern species to illustrate the life cycle of a fern. Now, we'll talk about other fern species in later episodes of the podcast, but we're going to start with my favorite fern species, Phlebodium aureum. But we're not there yet. I was looking for a fern species that had not only very rapid development to the sporophyte from the spore, but very low mortality along the way. Now, ferns I classify into 4 groups. Group 1 are your ferns that have very rapid spore to sporophyte development, like a month and a half, 2 months at most. But high mortality. So, sensitive fern is a good example, Anoclea sensibilis. Anoclea sensibilis actually has very high mortality, especially right around the stage where you're transplanting those young sporophytes into their own individual pots, their own planters. Group 2 are going to be your ferns that have rapid development from spore to sporophyte and low mortality. Now, Group 2 is what we were targeting for this class. Things like, what's it called? Crap, I'm blanking on the name. It's variegated ribbon fern, Pteris cretica albuliniana. Would be an example. Then you have species where the development from spore to sporophyte is very, very slow, but mortality is very, very low. That's where Phlebodium aureum falls. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. And then finally, group 4 is going to be your group where it's high mortality plus slow growth. So the Platycerium would fit nicely into this. Some of the fern species I work with take a good 15 to 20 months for these spores to germinate into a gametophyte and then for the gametophyte to produce sporophytes. Most Platycerium are like this. Pyrosia lingua is like this. Leposaurus bonanensis is like this. Now, I first met Phlebodium aureum at URI. There was a single plant growing in the greenhouse, in the conservatory part of the greenhouse, and I collected spores from it. Now, this is a beautiful fern. It's got basically these teal, turquoisey colored leaves with these yellow-orange sori on the bottoms of the leaves, and they're massive, which we're going to get into in a minute, but it's a really cool-looking fern. So I decided to go ahead and propagate it. I collected the spores, and I did my normal thing where I use a Q-tip to spread the spores across a little deli cup with sterilized soil, pro-mix to be precise, and then I cover it, I leave it under a light, and I watch it develop. So, Phlebodium aureum, as a sporophyte, grows quite rapidly. It will double in size roughly every 6 to 8 months as long as it's given the proper conditions. But the process of growing from a gametophyte to a sporophyte itself takes about 12 months, maybe longer. Although I've seen it happen in 9, it generally happens in 12 to 15 months, which is a very, very long time. Now, you would think that something that grows so rapidly once established would also grow fairly rapidly early on, but that's just not the case. So, it is a rapid growing fern once it reaches the sporophyte stage, which can take some time. So, here I am. I have my gametophytes in their cups of a bunch of different fern species, including Phlebodium aureum. And it's, late July of 2021. And I'm getting ready to move to Colorado. Which, by the way, I am not staying in Colorado. I am eventually planning on moving back east. That'll be a different video. But anyway, so I pack all of my little cups of gametophytes and what else, in my van that I had at the time. And we drove west, and I moved. And so then several more months pass, and eventually young sporophytes show up on the Phlebodium aureum gametophytes. Now, generally when you're growing ferns, you're going to notice that your young sporophyte leaves are a different color and a different shape than the gametophyte leaves. Phlebodium aureum is really funny because the young sporophyte leaves are like a yellowy color, and they're very spoon-shaped. It's really distinct. And if you see what an adult Phlebodium aureum looks like, it doesn't look anything like that. But the next couple of leaves will have the same color and the waviness. Phlebodium aureum is very distinct. It's a Florida native epiphytic fern, which we'll get into next. But the leaves are crinkly, like the leaf edge, you see it and it's undulating up and down. That's very distinctive. Even the full-grown sporophytes have that shape leaf. It's a very successful fern because I literally, plant the sporophytes when the new sporophyte leaves are like a ½ centimeter tall, and within a month they're an inch long. That is rapid development. The little baby has like a tuft of light yellow fur at the base. That's the rhizome developing. The rhizome is very hairy. Okay? The roots are black and spindly. And so within about a month of being removed from that sporophyte cup, and what I do with my epiphytic ferns is I make epiphyte mix, which is just 1 part perlite, 1 part leca to 1 part cocoa chip. And that cocoa chip I take out of my amphibian and reptile containers, autoclave it because there might be roaches and other shit in there, and so I autoclave it to kill anything, and then I use that because there's no other use for it. The animals have pooped and peed in it for 6 months, so I get rid of it, but I don't want to throw it away, so I can either compost it because I have a compost bin in my yard, or I can use it for my epiphytes. And they like that extra nitrogen boost. So I use that for my epiphytes. And I make an epiphyte mix, and I take little tiny like seedling starter trays that have like little tiny chambers, fill those about 2/3 of the way with the epiphyte mix. Then I put a thin layer of potting soil because the young roots of these epiphytic ferns are still very small and delicate, so I don't want them to dry up completely. Once they get to the size where they started to infiltrate that epiphyte mix, they're generally just fine. And so that's how I do my epiphytes. So Phlebodium aureum sporophytes can take many, many months to show up. I think the quickest I've had them show up was 6 months. Now, what I will tell you with ferns is that the age of the spores, how they were treated and stored, and the health of the mother plant are going to determine how quickly those spores germinate and then become gametophytes that produce sporophytes. So basically, the younger the spore and the healthier the parent plant, the quicker those spores become new plants. Basically, you have a spore, it becomes a gametophyte, then the gametophyte forms a sporophyte. So I generally think about the time from spore to sporophyte. Some ferns, it's like 5 or 6 weeks. Some ferns, it's over a year. And it really just depends on the species, but other factors, such as the age of those spores and how they were stored. Typical things. So the Phlebodium take 6 to 15 months to go from spore to sporophyte. Okay? Then those young sporophytes, however, which again start out like a ½ centimeter tall, triple in size in just a few weeks. And they keep doing that. Now, the relative growth rate does slow down as the plant ages, but it's still a fairly rapid growing fern. And this brings me to my next issue. I see pet stores and other places selling these as terrarium plants. So here's the thing. When they sell the young Phlebodium that are probably 4 to 6 months of age after being sporophytes for the first time, the plants are, 6 to 8 inches tall. Okay, that's how long the longest fronds are. Guess what? Within the next year, those fronds are going to be about, 1.5 feet long. Phlebodium aureum fronds, when the plant is mature, are a good 3 feet in length. Okay? And the plant has this huge creeping rhizome. It's not a small plant. It's not the biggest fern in the United States. That probably would go to like royal fern because those things get, 6 feet in height. But Phlebodium aureum is pretty big. It does not belong in a terrarium. Okay? It doesn't stay small for very long. Unless it dies. Which keeping it in a terrarium will probably do. So, what are some of the things about this fern that you would want to know to grow it correctly? It's an epiphyte, so I grow it in epiphyte mix, but I've heard it'll grow just fine in potting soil. I generally like to give all my epiphytes epiphyte mix. One, because it's cheaper to make than potting soil, but more importantly, because it promotes airflow to those roots. But the other thing about Phlebodium aureum, it likes a lot of water and a lot of light. Okay? It comes from a very rainy portion of the United States and Central America. Okay? It needs a lot of water. So I give it a lot of water. Mine get watered twice a week. They grow really phenomenally. They get fertilized every other month. You don't want to overdo it on fertilizer, but because it's an epiphyte, there aren't as many nutrients in its substrate. But mine are in my oldest ones are in 3-gallon bags. They're doing really well. Now, some other fun facts about this plant. It has extract in its rhizome that has actual scientific verification of its efficacy against skin cancer. Now, here's the thing. I am not a huge herbal remedies person. I'm not into alternative medicine. Now, I'm also not into people taking a pill for every single problem in their life. I fall in the middle. I think that, holistic methods for like preventative care, yada yada, are great. But if you have like stage 2 cancer, you shouldn't just be like sniffing ginger or whatever they do that is supposed to cure cancer. You should go to a doctor and get it taken care of by a medical professional. Okay? I'm not anti-doctor. I'm not anti-modern medicine. I'm anti-big pharma, but that's a different matter. I think that herbal remedies can be helpful for minor health conditions. The problem is a lot of the active ingredients aren't typically at a therapeutic dose. So there's a minimum dosage required for a lot of chemicals to be effective against certain conditions. Now, some plants like willow and plantain and yada yada, there is enough of the medicine for minor conditions. But like, if your arm gets blown off by, a grenade or something, you need to go to a hospital. Similarly, if you have a life-threatening condition, you need proper medical care. Now, the extract from Phlebodium aureum has been shown to be effective against skin cancers. Now, I'm not saying you're going to cure skin cancer by like cutting up a rhizome and rubbing it over the area. This would be more like we take Phlebodium aureum and we distill out that extract to the point where it's concentrated enough to make a difference. That's what I mean. But it is one of a few species of plants native to the United States whose extract, when properly processed, does have really good medical value. Okay? Again, if you have a mild headache and you take a little bit of willow bark, great. If you have stage 3 skin cancer or something like that, you need to go to an actual doctor. Please, please, please. So yeah, it's an interesting plant. Now, the other interesting thing is that there are a number of different cultivars of Phlebodium aureum. There are some with like extra crinkly leaves, like Extrand and a few others. I actually have some of those now. I saw one at Ace Hardware, but they wanted like $25 for it. Look, I love Phlebodium aureum, but I'm not about to drop $25 on one. Here's the thing. I have too many Phlebodium aureum right now. I wish more people in Colorado wanted to grow Phlebodium aureum. Everybody's intimidated by ferns. Phlebodium aureum is not that intimidating. And it has a number of different varieties. But the cool thing is that there are some varieties that have really crinkly leaves, really like funny looks to them. And because I'm a member of the American Fern Society, I got spore packets. Look, I'm not a patient person, but I compensate by just having 30 million, not literally, but 30 million projects going on at once. So if I set some spores up in a spore cup, right, and I then, have to wait, 8 months for them to do anything, it's okay, because I'm not thinking about them in those 8 months, because I have, 40,000 orchids and, a bunch of tadpoles and other stuff going on at the same time. So, I have the crinkly leafed varieties, Extrand and Mandarina or something like that. I don't remember the name of the other one, but I think it's Mandarina of Phlebodium aureum now. And they're doing quite well. I just transferred them out of their little spore cups. But I always make jokes about needing more Phlebodium aureum. It's not that they're bad plants, it's just a single plant takes up a lot of room because they get so honking big. It is one of the biggest plants that I own, okay? Now, I have some avocados as well. Those are going to get big, but it's going to take them a lot longer to get big. My avocado tree is 3 years old, and it's, you know, 15 inches tall. Okay? I have a banana, but it's a dwarf banana. My Phlebodium aureums. Now, I had royal fern and ostrich fern, but they died. My royal fern didn't get very far. I put my ostrich fern outside, and it just got too hot for it. What are you going to do? So anyway, another interesting thing about Phlebodium aureum is that they can have variable numbers of chromosomes. I believe people have found anywhere from 16 to 38 pairs or something like that. And, plants can be funny about chromosomes, but Phlebodium aureum takes it to a whole other level. So, key takeaways here. I think we're going to wrap this up. I promise to have longer episodes in the future, but I think that this is sufficient for now. Key takeaways. Phlebodium aureum is a really cool fern. It's really big. It's not suitable for terrariums, but it's really good mounted. It's really good attached to things. It's really good in pots of epiphyte mix, and I recommend it. It's a really nice looking plant. So go out there and grow yourself some Phlebodium aureum. If you really want me to send you some spores, I will gladly do so. I have access to, the CSU Conservatory has some growing, as well as I have some growing. And CSU Conservatory just wants me to cut off all the fertile fronds so that they don't have more Phlebodium popping up in random spots in the greenhouse conservatory like they do now. So I can get people spores if they want to try growing this cool fern. Thanks for watching or listening.